Hi, it's Dave. It's extremely difficult for a new company to enter an entrenched market. In this video, I'm going to introduce a concept called the Beachhead strategy. And this is going to up your game as an investor and improve your business skills as well. In a previous video I shared this week called Crossing the Chasm, I introduced a framework of how to understand how new technology is adopted and moves from a niche product into the mainstream. I talk about in that video how a lot of companies don't make the jump over the chasm because their product in a way is too niche, and usually it requires the early adopters to put in their own effort to make the product more usable. However, to make the jump over the chasm into the mainstream, you need a product that's a whole product, a product that's easy to use and convenient and is just super compelling. However, there's another angle to look at it. Even if you've got a decent product that you think is better than anything else out there, and if you're trying to make the jump over into the mainstream, sometimes it can be difficult because the entrenched players have the brand, they have the loyalty, they have the relationship, they have the distribution outlets, and most of all, they have the trust with the consumer. In some markets, this trust with the consumer has been built up over decades and decades of time. And sometimes it can be naive for a new entrant to think that just within several months, they can win over the trust of new people. Perhaps the best way to solve this problem is what I'm calling the beachhead strategy. Now, this beachhead strategy was introduced in the Crossing the Chasm book by Jeffrey Moore, and it's been adopted and implemented by various tech companies throughout the years. Perhaps one of the most famous companies that implemented this beachhead strategy was Facebook. And I'll share how Facebook implemented the strategy, but first let me explain what the beachhead strategy is. The beachhead strategy is taken from an analogy with World War II. Europe was being taken over by Nazi Germany, and the Allied forces had to find a way to win the war. The turning point of World War II was on D-Day, and it was the time where the Allied forces focused all of their attention on Normandy. Normandy was a beach in France that the Allied forces had decided to focus on taking at all costs. And their strategy was, if they could just take one beach, in other words, if they could just establish a beachhead on the continent, then they can expand that beachhead and slowly start taking over more and more area of Europe. And as you know, this strategy worked. And in fact, it was a profound strategy because the principles involved can be cross-applied to many different areas. In business, when you're tackling on a big entrenched market with huge players with millions or billions of dollars of capital and billions of dollars of relationship trust and brand established, it's extremely difficult just to think you can go head on with these people. Rather, the smarter strategy is to do a beachhead strategy where you take a market segment or a niche and you provide to a particular group of people the best solution possible that they're not able to find elsewhere. And as you win over that market segment or that niche, then you can start expanding into adjacent markets. And if you do this well, you can gain momentum and you can build up your market and eventually take on the entrenched players. Facebook is probably the most renowned example of the beachhead strategy. Early on, MySpace had a huge insurmountable lead, and Facebook was basically a nothing in the social networking field. However, Facebook knew that they had a better product and they had better technology, and most of all, they knew exactly where they wanted to go. But rather than taking on MySpace head on, they decided to take a different approach. They wanted to establish a beachhead, and their first beachhead was the college campuses. And their strategy was that they would take over one campus at a time. Supposedly, they even had a strategy room where they mapped out all of the campuses in the US, and they showed which campuses that Facebook had taken over. And they knew which other campuses had dominant social networking platforms that weren't Facebook. And so for Facebook, it was a battle and it was a war. And in their control room or strategy room, they had the Allied forces. They had all of their campuses that they were winning over on their side. And then they had the enemy, which was all of these other social networks that had a dominant position on other campuses. One by one, Facebook focused their efforts on one campus at a time. And before long, they were able to dominate the whole college scene in the US. But what was remarkable about Facebook's strategy, they didn't stop there. In fact, they used this beachhead strategy for every single country that they entered in. For example, in Germany, there was a far more popular social networking platform, especially among colleges. And Facebook decided to tackle them one campus at a time, establish a beachhead, and before you knew it, their usage started to skyrocket. By the time MySpace woke up and they saw Facebook trailing them and eventually overtaking them, it was too late. Facebook already had a dominant position, they had their beachhead secured, and they were growing and improving their product at a super fast pace. Another example of this beachhead strategy was was Amazon. Amazon, rather than tackling on all of e-commerce in the very beginning, they decided just to focus on books. And by focusing just on books and being the go-to place to buy books online, they were able to execute and then tackle on adjacent markets. And as they built on adjacent markets, that's how Amazon was able to grow and become mainstream. Let's take another example. Let's say you want to start a new restaurant in a city. And let's say you go to the center of the city and you create a restaurant called Food, and you sell just generic food at a generic price, and it doesn't really have an angle or slant. The chances of your new restaurant taking off is going to be actually very slim. For a new restaurant to get established, it needs an angle, it needs a special approach where people can understand what this new restaurant brings to the table. For example, you can open up an Argentinian restaurant and you serve Argentinian food and you're the best Argentinian food in the city. Then you might have a chance with that restaurant. Another example, let's say you want to serve Mexican food and you make a Mexican restaurant, but there are 10 other Mexican restaurants in that area. You have to have a unique slant. Either you're going to have the best food, or you're going to have the cheapest food, or maybe you have to have the most family-friendly atmosphere or the most romantic atmosphere. Whatever it is, you need a special angle where people can appreciate your business or your restaurant for what it is. In other words, in order to attract and to survive and to get your initial customers, you have to be the best at something. You can't give a burrito for $10 and the restaurant right next door is giving a burrito for $10, but it's like 3 times as better and more tasty. Another example is, let's say you're creating a new video game, and for this video game you decide to emulate Fortnite, and you want to make a video game that's like Fortnite, but it's just not as good. If your video game doesn't have a unique special angle, it's basically dead on arrival. No one's gonna choose your game over Fortnite if you're trying to like copy Fortnite but you're not as good. With a restaurant or a video game, you can actually tailor your product to a more niche, to a smaller audience. And rather than going after, let's say, the whole Fortnite crowd, you can go after a specific niche of that crowd. For example, maybe it's women with young kids who like to play Fortnite. Maybe you provide a different version that's more catered to them. But the problem is with certain industries, it's just difficult. There's a high cost of barrier to enter. While you might be able to make a restaurant for like $100,000 or $200,000, if you want to enter an industry like the car industry, you need billions and billions of dollars to develop the car, and also you need large economies of scale to make the car affordable. In the auto industry, there aren't that many niches. And the reason is because with the niche, you can't really take advantage of the economies of scale to drive the price down. In a lot of ways with the auto industry, the niches really are just at the top of the market. These custom kind of like small production vehicles. And as you go downstream in the market, as the cars get cheaper and cheaper, the niches go away and everything becomes more and more mainstream. And when you look at it like this, what Tesla did with their first original master plan was ingenious. They understood this beachhead strategy. And rather than tackling the mainstream market with a subpar car that couldn't really go head to head with the IC ecosystem, instead they decided to go after the niche. They picked the sports car, the high-end sports car market, above $100,000. And they knew they didn't need to attract everyone in that market, rather they needed to attract the right market segment. They needed to provide the best sports car at that price for those people. And that's what they did with the original Tesla Roadster. The Tesla Roadster only sold 2,450 cars. But in a lot of ways, it was massively successful because Tesla proved that they could tackle a niche and win a niche market. The next niche market was kind of the premium luxury sedan market. And in that market, Tesla had a big challenge, and they had to provide the best sedan, the most compelling sedan compared to any other IC sedan ecosystem out there. But that was a momentous and incredible feat to try to accomplish. But Tesla pulled off a miracle. And if you haven't watched it, watch that Crossing the Chasm video, and I share exactly how Tesla went mainstream with their whole product. They provided a more compelling product than the current IC ecosystem out there. And Tesla is continuing their beachhead strategy. What they're doing is they're tackling one market segment at a time. They're going now into the Model 3 and the Model Y segments. And their whole strategy with these segments is to provide the most compelling car for that price. And that's why it's so difficult to stop Tesla and their momentum, is because with each product they release, they're leveraging also all of the technology and the expertise and the products of the past. Their motors are getting better, their batteries are getting more efficient, their software is getting better, their autonomous driving tech is improving. Everything is improving with each product, and with each new market segment they go after, they're establishing a beachhead by becoming the preeminent and the dominant product in that market category. Now let's compare this to what other automakers are doing. Rather than going after a market and establishing a beachhead where they're the dominant EV or car in that segment, the automakers are doing a completely different strategy. The other automakers have released electric vehicles like the Nissan Leaf or the Chevy Bolt or the upcoming VW ID3. And the question is, exactly what market are they trying to dominate? What kind of beachhead are they trying to establish? And for almost every automaker except Tesla, their focus has been more on this eco-buyer market. They're looking more at the Prius market. However, in my opinion, I don't think that's the right market. In fact, I don't even think that's an enduring market. Oftentimes with technology transitions, there's something called bridge technology. And what bridge technology is, it's a technology that just exists for a certain window of opportunity before the real thing comes. For example, an MP3 player back in the day, it really was just a bridge technology. It wasn't really here to stay. It was just a transitional product until all of our sound and files goes into our phone. And even that, all of the files eventually end up in the cloud. In the auto market, I think this whole eco-buyer segment or this Prius buyer segment, I think it's more like a passing fad. It's a window of opportunity, maybe 5 or 10 years. There's a certain amount of people who are placing this as a top priority. However, over time, if you look at it maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years out, I don't think this is really a lasting market segment. And when all cars make that transition to electric, it does't mean anything to be an eco-buyer because all the cars will be electric and will have no emissions. And so in a lot of ways, all of these other automakers except Tesla, they're tackling the wrong market segment. They're tackling a bridge technology segment or a market segment that is dying and shrinking over time because it's being disrupted by technology or by the electric vehicle itself. Tesla is the only automaker that is serious about establishing a beachhead against IC vehicles. In fact, in my opinion, Tesla is the only company out there, at least on the mainstream automakers, that is really going to war against the IC vehicles. They have a strategy and they're tackling beachhead by beachhead, establishing dominance in each of the market segments that they're going into. If the other automakers want a chance to survive, they need to wake up. They need to understand that all of their IC markets are dying over time, and they need to start making war against their own products. They need to establish these cutting-edge, revolutionary, compelling EV products that are far better than their IC counterparts. And not just that, they need to fix the infrastructure and the charging system where they can mitigate the pain of long distance travel for the average user. If you're starting a new business, understand this beachhead strategy. You need to go after a certain niche. You need to have a more compelling product than anything else there for a particular group of people. Then and only then can you start building more and more of market share and market dominance. This is also super helpful for investors too, because if you take a new company, you want to see what type of beachhead they have. You want to see how compelling their product really is for the particular group of people. And you also want to assess and analyze the probabilities of this company expanding into adjacent markets and having a dominant market share. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. We're talking about investing in business and other topics, and we're doing so through a deeper lens. We're not just trying to follow the herd or take shallow emotional reactionism. Rather, we're using objective analysis, quantitative and qualitatively, and we're trying to look at things deeper and trying to get a sense of where things are headed and use that to our advantage as investors. For the rest of this video, I want to answer a few questions. The first question comes from Isaac via my davelee.tv website. He says, "Hello Dave, I've been watching your YouTube channel religiously and greatly appreciate your wisdom. My question is, I am only a quarter of the way of being an accredited investor, which prevents me from buying the rumored Starlink IPO. Do you have any insight how I can secure some shares since I don't meet the criteria? I would be a proud owner and not trade my shares." Thanks, Isaac, for the question. For the Starlink IPO that's rumored upcoming, maybe in a year or two or so, once it goes IPO, which stands for Initial Public Offering, you don't have to worry if you're an accredited investor or not, because anyone who has a brokerage account can just buy some shares on the open market. However, before Starlink goes IPO, in order to secure shares, you need to secure them in the secondary market. And this is a market that's not a public market, and it's a place where some private shareholders might exchange or sell their shares. The challenge about securing shares of SpaceX in the secondary market is that SpaceX has a special right of refusal where they can actually deny the transfer of shares from their employees to other people. And not only that, in order to access the secondary market, you need to be an accredited investor. I've been doing some research on this and I actually need some help from any viewers. If you actually have SpaceX shares, if you're a SpaceX shareholder, I'd love to know how you got them and if there's any secondary markets out there that are selling SpaceX shares to people. The next question comes from 96EENG. It says, "Great analysis, Dave. I personally think it's too late to catch Tesla. The best way forward would be to collaborate. It would be great if one of the auto giants built a car around Tesla technology, whether it be autonomous tech or battery tech. I'd love to see a Toyota or Honda with a Tesla inside badge. Apple would be best to focus on wearable technology, improving human and technological integration. Maybe they should partner with Neuralink. Also, Michael Barth shares a question. He says, could Apple outsource to Tesla? All right, over the past several months, there's been chatter from different people who are encouraging, suggesting that Tesla sell their drive chains and their technology to other automakers. Now, in my opinion, I actually think this is a terrible idea, and I'll share why. There are certain companies out there that specialize on the whole experience. They control the hardware, and they control the software, and they control the servicing, and they control the entire ecosystem. And through that, they're able to charge high margins and achieve amazing customer satisfaction. Probably one of the most visible examples of this is Apple. Apple controls their hardware and their software and the experience and the service and the entire ecosystem of services and products, and they have certain standards and values that ensure the user has a great experience. It wouldn't make sense for Apple to license their technology to other phone makers. Like, for example, you have an Apple inside, right, a Samsung phone. That's not the approach, that's not the value, and that's not the whole business model that Apple stands for. In a similar way, Tesla has a whole experience business model. They're able to charge high margins, and they're able to achieve amazing customer satisfaction because they control and they steward and they manage every single part of the whole entire user experience. Once you start taking out different parts of the Tesla experience and you start sending it to different companies, it's just a recipe for disaster. Let me give you some examples. Let's say hypothetically, Tesla sells their drivetrain to another automaker who wants to build an electric vehicle. Now, is that automaker also going to get autopilot or autonomous driving tech within that? Obviously they should, because autonomous driving is the future. So now Tesla sells their drivetrain, which is like their battery packs, their motors, and all of the control units there. And now they sell the software as well. So do they sell the screen too, or the whole interface? Maybe the whole UI. If they do that, the problem is all of that software is integrated. The software controls all of the battery pack and the modules. The software controls so many different systems in the car as well. Let me give you an example. In a Tesla, the software controls the doors, the locks, the windows, the seats, the seat heaters, the window wipers. It controls like all of the camera sensors. It controls the heating. It controls the AC, and it's remotely connected to your phone. There are like dozens of hundreds and hundreds of features that the software controls in a Tesla car. So if you're another OEM and you're purchasing a Tesla drivetrain, and let's say you're also purchasing Tesla software, then do you also purchase all of the things that are connected to Tesla software? For example, do you purchase the door locks and the window wipers and the seat heaters and the air conditioning system and the vents and all of that? And if you do that, then what's left in the car? These OEMs probably just need to build a shell around the car, right, and call it their car. It makes no sense because they can't make any margin off of that. It doesn't make sense for Tesla also. For example, who services these cars? For example, if the drivetrain, the batteries, the motors and everything, but also the software, and then all the electronics and the sense and the things that are controlling all of these parts of the car, all Teslas, who services that car? Does it go to Tesla service center, or does it go to the OEM automaker service center? Also, who gives the over-the-air updates for the software? Does Tesla manage all these over-the-air updates for all these different automakers who are buying their drivetrains and software? That just sounds like a complete mess. Also, how does Tesla ensure that, for example, the autonomous driving tech works on every single one of these cars? Does Tesla require that the sensors and the cameras be put at the exact right space? And what if Tesla wants to change things around? Does it require all these other automakers to change it around as well? Selling these drivetrains and autonomous driving tech and the whole package to these other auto OEMs just seems like a complete mess to me. Also, currently, Tesla has a bigger problem at hand. And the problem is they don't have enough batteries for their own production. So it makes more sense for Tesla to focus on battery production, upping their cells and their pack production so that they can actually produce and supply to all the demand they have. The other thing is Tesla demand in the future, I think, is just going to increase as the technology gets better, as autonomous driving gets better, as the battery costs go down. And Tesla needs to focus on building battery production and building their own car production, in my opinion. If Tesla actually loses its focus and starts becoming like this supplier to other OEMs, I think it's actually a step backward in terms of their core mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable transport. And the reason is because I think the best way to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy is for Tesla to focus and to build more and more of their cars. That's the only way that Tesla can ensure the whole product experience, making sure that the end customer is having a fantastic time with their car and their product. All right, the next question is from Bob Long. He says, Dave, can you comment on how you avoided investing in Theranos? It seems that stock could have easily sucked you in before the reality became known. All right, if you're not familiar with Theranos, it was basically this startup that had promised this revolutionary blood testing technology, and it basically crashed and burned. Here's my take on how you can avoid investing in a company like that. First, the principle is you don't need to swing at everything. In other words, just because you see some hot flying technology or this hot flying company, you don't need to invest in it. In fact, you can wait for the right pitch, the pitch that you understand that's right in your swing zone to swing and to actually have the best chances at it. I'm not too fond of investing in companies or products that are outside my area of expertise or understanding. Sure, I can pick up that understanding, and sometimes I do. I just read voraciously and really try to become an expert in that area. However, there are certain areas that unless you're really in that industry and really a specific niche expert, it's really hard to keep up and understand exactly what the companies are doing. One example is in the medical field. Recently, someone put in the comments for me to check out this company who has a so-called cancer breakthrough technology. When I looked up the company, it's hard to understand exactly what the company is doing. And then as I looked further into it, the company has 7 employees with a market cap of $100 million. Who knows, maybe the company is a legit company, but I just don't know that much about that technology. I'm just not a domain expert in that area. I'm comfortable with not swinging at every pitch. There are a lot of companies out there that are kind of wishful thinking companies. They think that once they finish some innovative magical product that they will become the next big thing. However, for every one of those wishful thinking companies that actually makes it, there are dozens, not hundreds of others that fail. One example is this company several years ago called Beachhead, and they had been making this sapphire glass that potentially would have gone into the iPhone. And Apple was looking into it, and there were rumors that Apple was ready to sign a contract. And this Beachhead company was promoting and saying that they're on the verge of making this sapphire display that would go into all of these iPhones. And there are lots of people who actually got swayed by this and the promises of the management, and they bought in big into Beachhead stock. However, the problem was the promises were never realized. The technology wasn't there, and the sapphire glass displays never came to fruition. When I looked into that company personally, I looked past through their annual reports, and I looked especially at what their management was saying and promising, and did the management deliver on their promises in past years. And what I discovered was this management was kind of very shady. All the things they had promised in the past just weren't coming to fruition. And it really seemed to me that it was kind of a desperate company just trying to survive. And that stock I didn't touch even with a 10-foot pole because this is way too risky. A lot of people think in order to get high rewards or completely outside gains, you need to take high risk. However, my approach is different. I want a low to moderate risk in order to get super outside gain. And in that sense, I'm very conservative. In that sense also, I'm very patient. Some people are lured by the temptation of fast gains. They want to see their money double or triple or go up 5 times within a year or so. And it doesn't matter what it takes, they just want that end goal. However, my approach is different. I don't think the end results matter as much as more of the process and how you get there and the skills and experience and knowledge that you're attaining and accumulating and compounding over time. In my opinion, the source of investing success is not necessarily picking the best companies. It starts with your mind and with your habits. It starts with developing quantitative and qualitative skills. It starts with thinking deeper and taking objective analysis seriously. It starts with a framework of how to identify big winners, but also how to know if a company is not going to be a big winner. And all of this builds up kind of the skill of forecasting, the skill to see things before others can see. I really don't think there's a super shortcut to this. It's an immensely difficult skill that takes a lot of time and breadth and depth to accumulate. And that's kind of the point of this channel, is to uncover those skills and to highlight the potential of these skills. And it's definitely not for everyone. All right, I hope you guys like this video. Please go ahead and like the video, add a comment, add a question. I'm reading through all the questions and I'm using a lot of these questions for the videos as well. Please share this video with your friends. Share it on Facebook, on email, on your forums, on Reddit, on everywhere you can. It really will help to get the word out. Anyways, have a great day and we'll see you on my next video. Thanks.